building an indie business in the center of venture capital. I'm Alex Edmonds, and this is the Building an Indie Business podcast. Okay, so this episode today that you will be listening to is how to run a community. And the reason why I wanted to do this episode is because I had how to grow a community, and I didn't talk about anything else about a community. And so I'm going to be talking about the benefits of a community, the problems that you will run into with a community, the don'ts of a community, random tips. I'll talk about how to grow a community, and I'll talk about that last because I have some new ideas or new things that I'm doing to grow a community. But I will talk about the old stuff just to give people a refresher and introduce it for people who are new to the podcast. Okay. Before we start, the survey is in the show notes if you want to fill that out. I really appreciate it. Thank you. Okay. So the benefits of running a community for your podcast. The first benefit is you can easily get feedback from your listeners. Let's say you have a Telegram group. You can say, hey, the episode is out now. If you have any questions or feedback, let me know. And as soon as people see that and listen to the episode, you can get feedback almost instantly or within 24 hours, which is something you wouldn't be able to do if you didn't have a community built around your podcast. Okay, another benefit of having a community is the members of the community can be your support system. So when you are having problems with your podcast or you're down about it, you can tell people in the community about your struggle with the podcast or whatever, and they will help you out with your problems, which is very nice to have. The final benefit of a community is you can create online friendships and take those friendships to the real world. So let's say you're traveling to a different city. Let's say you're traveling to New York. If you have a listener in New York, you can say on the podcast, like for your announcements, that you're headed to New York. And if any of your New York listeners want to hang out with you, get in contact with you. And that way you're creating real friendships. Okay. Now to the problems that you will have running a community. Okay. The first problem that I've run into with my community is spam. There are people that create accounts to send people links, and that's all they do. So they will send a link out to the community, and they want people to click on it to make money. So one way you can prevent people spamming the community is you insert a paywall to the community. This adds an extra layer, and some spammers might not want to pay to spam your community. So one way to get real users around this is you can add them manually or give them a code that will bypass the paywall. Okay. Another way to avoid spam is make your most active users admins to the community, and as soon as they see spam, they can delete it as well. And this creates less problems, or it's something that you don't have to think about. One less problem to think about. Okay. Another problem that I've run into, which is not a big deal, but I see it, is people lurking the community. And one way to handle lurkers is recurring posts. So when someone is a lurker, the reason why they are a lurker is because they feel like they don't have much to contribute to a community. So you can give them examples to of types of posts that they can add and they can contribute. So one example is a post about milestones. So let's say you run a podcast community. Okay, that's really interesting. Where'd I get that idea from? Anyways, you run a podcast community or a podcasting community. One recurring post that you can do is milestones. So every time you reach a milestone with your podcast, you can post about it in that thread. So types of milestones would be number of downloads total for your podcast, or per podcast or per episode. So let's say if your episode reaches 100 downloads, that's one milestone that you could talk about. Another recurring post that you can do is weekly new episodes. So have a thread where people can post their new episodes if they had a new episode that week. Okay. You can also have a monthly thread to welcome new members of the community. And that way, those lurkers can view that thread and be introduced to new members. And if they have something in common with a new member, they can interact with them. Okay. The next recurring post that you can do is ask members, or have a thread asking members if they're having problems. And if the lurker is having problems, they'll want to share about it to contribute to the community and have their problem fixed. Okay. You can ask for advice specifically from someone you know is lurking, and that way you're directly addressing them and they will feel the need to respond. Okay. Another way to fix your lurking problem is to share your threads on different platforms. So share your thread from your community on social media, and that way your community will get more visibility and more people will come to your community. Okay. The final way you can deal with lurkers is gamification. And so what gamification is giving community members points for contributing to the community. And that way, if they're a lurker, they might keep posting or post in general to gain points. I don't really like this method though, because it's tricking the members, or it's like a gray area to me at least. So yeah, that's one method. Another problem that you'll run into is people. So the way you want to avoid problems with people or people in the community is by setting an example for the type of conversations that will be that are okay in the community. And the way you can do this is by being active yourself in the community, or have a set example of conversations that you want in the community, like pinned in your community, and that way people know what kind of conversations you can have. Okay, so another problem that you will run into with people is they're inappropriate, or they try to hurt. They say inappropriate things basically. For example, I was in one community where someone was asking about their content not being viewed, and they were asking about if other people see the trend with their content. And then someone was like, "Oh, is your content so garbage that your content is being viewed less?" And I felt that was kind of out of line. This wasn't my community, so thank God. So the way you want to deal with that is by messaging that person who's being inappropriate in private and saying like, "Hey, that wasn't cool." Okay. Um, Now on to the don'ts of a community. One thing you don't want to do when you're creating a community is making it difficult to for people to join. So don't make them jump through hoops. Don't make them sign up through email and add their Twitter account, add their Facebook account. Just make it very easy. Try to make it one click to join. Okay. Another thing you don't want to do is spam members with emails from the community. It's kind of annoying. People don't like it. They'll delete the emails eventually as soon as they see them, and that might discourage them from contributing to the community. Okay. Another thing you don't want to do is make members feel bad. So if someone's new to your community and they ask a very basic question, don't make them feel bad for not knowing that question. Just point them in the right direction of how they can get the answer to the question. Point them to a previous thread that answers that question. When people join a community and you make them feel bad, that discourages them from participating. And when someone else from the community sees a person getting put down, that discourages them from contributing to the community. Okay. The last thing that you don't want to do is promote an empty community. So don't start promoting your community as soon as you create it. What you want to do is you want to wait a bit, wait for people to ask questions, respond to questions, and then you want to promote it, like have a big launch. Okay. Random tips that I have. The first tip that I have is email is the most inclusive. So email is very straightforward. You use your email, which everyone has, then they can join the community. Don't make them, when other communities, you have to create an account and then you join. Like you have to create a social media account and then join. This is bad. Not bad, but it's not good because it adds an extra layer to join the community, and with email you avoid all that. Okay. Some people may want to promote their stuff, so have a section where people can specifically promote their stuff. One thing I don't like about some communities, or especially the ones that are hosted on chats, like chat forums or whatever. I don't like when they're like we're in the middle of an interesting conversation and someone new comes in and then they're promoting their content. I find it very annoying, and just have a place where people can promote their stuff, and that avoids that problem. Okay. The next tip is have a place where people can donate. And this is because it's expensive to run a community. So if you don't want people paying for the community, just have like a section, and that way when people ask, oh, can I donate? You point them over there and you have their money. Yeah, it's not a bad thing for people to donate their money. Don't worry about it. Okay. The next tip I have is immediately put ads on your community, and that way you can monetize it as well. Same thing with the donations. The types of ads that you want to have in the community is from companies that will benefit from your community, or like more people in your community. So I run a podcasting community. You know this already. So the types of ads that I would put on the community, or like in the community. Okay. The types of ads that I would put in the community are ads for companies that would benefit from the creation of more podcasters. So a microphone company, a podcasting host, things like that. Okay. Have a place where people can commit or submit feature IDs, and that way you know what the community wants from within the community, like features and stuff like that. Okay. My last random tip is create an FAQ, and this is how you avoid having to type the same exact questions over and over again. When someone asks the basic questions, you just point them in the directions of the frequently asked questions, and if a question gets asked repeatedly, add it to the frequently asked questions, and you don't have to deal with it too much. Okay, finally, how to grow a community. New stuff. Okay, so the first thing that you can do to grow a community is niche down. And what I mean by this is choose a specific section of your community, the type of community that you have of people. So I run a podcasting community. And so right now I'm focusing on people that have a technology podcast. And that way I can post in like technology places or like forums, other forums, to get people to join the community. I'm not focusing on every podcaster, someone doing sports, someone doing comedy. It's very focused, and that way it's easier to get them to join the community because I can speak their language in quotes. Okay. Make it easier for people to join. That's another one. Yeah, that's another one. I talked about that before, so I don't really need to go over that again. How to grow your community. Third tip, interviews. And this can be either you going out and being interviewed and talking about the community, or you interviewing people in the community and have them talk about how being in the community has benefited them. Okay. Directories. So there are directories for communities, and you should go out and look for those directories for the community, or like a community's directory in your niche, and that way anyone who's looking at those community directories can easily find your community on that directory's website. Okay. The final new way to grow your community is email. This means have a newsletter, put the community, like a link to the community in that newsletter, put the community, a link to the community in your email signature. And yeah, that's the final point about email. What I talked about in the last episode, social media. Create a social media account for your community, and then you can post the different threads in your community on your social media accounts, and then people will see that stuff and join your community. Yes. Okay. The next thing you can do is write. And you write about how things related to the topic of your community. So I run a podcasting community. I've said this like 4 times this episode. Sorry. And I write about podcasting. And that way I can relate my writing to my community. And so recently I wrote an article about interviewing, and I talked about Open Podcast, and that way people can click on the link to Open Podcast in the article and then join the community. Okay. Interacting in other communities. So in other communities, podcasting might be like a little section. And what I do is I go to those communities and I answer questions about podcasting. And then I put a link to Open Podcast in my profile so that way people can see my answers to their podcasting questions. And they if they have any more questions, they can join the community. Okay. Creating interactions. So you want to create interactions within the community. So when other people want to join the community and they're looking at it, they see that Open Podcast is very much active, because when someone looks at a community, they may be discouraged to join the community if they see that the community isn't really active. Okay. The final way to grow a community is provide value. And how you can provide value is by helping your community members in any way. So let's say someone in Open Podcast doesn't know how to submit their podcast to the podcast players, the major podcast players. What I can do as the person who created Open Podcast is create a video that will show them how to submit their podcast to all the major podcasting players. And that way I'm providing value to that community member and any other community member who needs help with that same problem, because I can link them to the video. Okay, that's all I have for running a community. Thank you for listening. If you want to host a podcast and you don't want to go through the trouble of adding your podcast to every platform, things like that, you can host a episode of the Open Podcast Community Podcast. Send me the audio and what you want in the show notes, and I will add it to the Open Podcast Community Podcast. So if you're interested in that, join the Telegram chat and let me know, and we could work something out. Thank you for listening. Have a nice day. Bye.